proved to the establishment that the concentration camp technique, the reversion to the second dimension of fascism, the terrorist phase, but to prove that this terrorism won't work on us, it won't stop our movement.
This is the BGF oath. Weusi Gaidi Jama, that means Black Guerrilla Family. If I should break my stride or falter at my comrade's side, this oath shall kill me. If my words should prove untrue, should I betray the chosen few, this oath shall kill me. Should I submit to greed or lust, should I betray the people's trust, this oath shall kill me. Should I grow lax in discipline, in time of strife refuse my hand, this oath shall kill me. Should I fear any man or be slow to take a stand, this oath shall kill me. Long live the spirit of George Lester Jackson and the guerrillas of Black August, Weusi Gaidi Jama.
Greetings and salutations. It's your host, Gabe Morales, coming back for another episode on Black Guerrilla Family Members and Associates over the past 6 decades or so. Today I'm going to cover the R and S last names. I'll start off with Paul Mume, who is from Oakland and was a longtime BGF member going back to the 1970s with B number 72683. I show he was housed at various institutions and finally ended up in Pelican Bay, where he was considered to be a captain, and then moved up into the general spot, along with Daryl Fuma Burnett, working under Supreme Commander Kenneth T. Carter, and became a leader in the shoe hunger strikes. When the shoe kickouts occurred, he was housed at Corcoran Sadaf in 2015, and continued to assert his innocence in his case, and was finally freed in the year 2022. He talks to us here a little bit about his experiences about knowing your history and culture and preparing for revolution.
Growing up in Oakland, my family members was Black Panthers. So I grew up in West Oakland. I remember I used to sell the Black Panthers papers. Some of my relatives was related to some of the, the leaders of the Black Panthers back then. And when I came to prison, I met a lot of brothers who was reading George, reading Mao Zedong, reading Linus and different things. And these brothers used to say, brother, what you need to start doing, you need to start reading more about your history, your culture, start learning more about where your place will be in history, And as I started reading a lot of that stuff, I guess that's where my fight started coming about, because I used to see how a lot of brothers used to get mistreated, getting denied their rights. So I decided to start picking up some of them little law books. And as I was reading them law books, I tried to find ways to help these guys file 602 appeals, to write certain grievances. And, that's where my commitment came about. And then I started getting involved with some of the major lawsuit cases as a class member. And I used to piss off the administration for being involved in that kind of stuff. And that gave me joy, because if I made them mad, that meant I was doing something right. So I kept on pursuing that issue. And as a result, they retaliated against me, put them labels on me to keep me in the hole. They put these gang labels on people to justify keep you in the hole. They're transferred to different prisons to keep you locked up in the hole. But like I say, I welcome all that. And eventually, I was put in the hole in 1977. And it was funny because when I was put in the hole, like I said, I was the beginning of the right versus motive. At that time, they didn't have what they call 114D's lockup orders to tell you what you've been in the hole for. So when I was been in the hole, I went to a committee They locked up 8 other people with me. And when they locked me up, they said, Mr. Red, you involved in the conspiracy to assault and kill staff. You and 8 other people. The next week, the other 8 was released from the SHU, except me, So they said, we're going to send you out to this yard and we're going to observe you for 90 days. We bring you back to committee. Now, this yard, prison officials used to label this yard. So they would label the yard BGF, NFs, and stuff like that. On the yard you can go to. They would label this. So you go out on the yard, you play handball, lift weights, basketball, you go back to committee 90 days later, oh, we seen you was observed talking to so-and-so, so-and-so, therefore you must be associate or a member of this organization, therefore we're going to keep you indeterminate in the SHU, I said, wow. Well, it took almost, 15 years later, or close to 20 years later, for another administration in Corcoran to find out all these years I had been an indeterminate was in violation of my due process because nobody never provided me with 1030 forms telling me what I was in the hole for, So again, I started learning how the system really didn't care about us. They was retaliating against us because of the way we was thinking.
There was a Keith Achille Richardson out of Oakland. Don't have a lot of information on him, just that he had F numbers in Frank 43921 and was housed at Pelican Bay in 2011, and when the SHU kickouts happened was moved to Solano in 2015, but I currently show is not in custody. I'm still trying to find out if Harold Richardson is from the Richardson family from Riverside or if he's related to this Keith Achille Richardson, because I believe there's another group of BGF members with the last name of Richardson out of Oakland. If anybody knows, I'd be kind of interested in knowing. Was a Tyrone Robinson, who entered CDC in the 1980s with C numbers as in Charlie, 82830. It appears he was paroled, but then hit the streets of Oakland, California, where he's from, and when he was 24 years old, was the one that shot Huey Newton. I remember at the time some people saying that he might be in trouble when he got to prison, but most of the BGF I talked to didn't want to have nothing to do with Huey Newton, although most of them did believe in Black Revolution and liberation. They just felt that Huey was a bully and a drug user and was basically just a thug. Other people had different opinions of him, as I covered in the last N episode. He was convicted of that murder and returned to CDC in December 1991. I show he was housed at Corcoran SHU and then moved to High Desert State Prison when the SHU kickouts occurred in 2015. And I currently show Leon Solano, and evidently is still on good terms with the BGF and Kumi. I've said it many times before, when I talk about these prison gangs, I do not mean to glorify anybody or the gang lifestyle, but I've also stated many times that being involved in that life usually only ends up in 3 ways: a life term in prison, a life of addiction to drugs, likely hospitalization with frequent lifetime injuries, or an early grave. And in this case, I'm showing this picture not to offend anybody, but just to show what can happen inside. The individual you're seeing is the inmate Ross. Number A is an Alpha 55443. And as you can see in this picture, he has a noose or a garrote around his neck and multiple deep stab wounds. Ross was killed in 1974 in the California Department of Corrections. If anybody knows more about that case, please let me know. Now I'll get into the S last names and talk a little bit about Aaron Jabari Muenda Scott out of Oakland. CDC number H as in Henry, 30536. I show that he entered CDC in March of 1997. It is my understanding that Jabari Scott was a very influential BGF member and allegedly tried to extort some Hollywood and professional sports celebrities. In the San Francisco Bayview National Black newspaper, which has a lot of information on the BGF, Scott wrote an article about Tehachapi SHU and states that it was the worst of any SHU to a prison or jail that he had seen during his incarceration. You could look that article up online. He also wrote an article expressing his gratitude for people who helped with the hunger strikes and getting CDC to revise their security housing unit and classification procedures. There was Harold Rafiki Schamberger out of San Jose. Show that Schamberger was convicted of first-degree murder in 1984 and also found guilty of being accessory to another murder. Upon appeal, the court confirmed Schamberger's murder conviction, but reversed the accessory count on a statute of limitation grounds. Evidently, defendant Schamberger and Lloyd Bryce were charged in connection with the murders of Jerome Nance and William Fisher. And like I said, Schamberger was found guilty of first-degree murder in the Nance homicide trial. Show that Schamberger was housed at Pelican Bay for many years and then housed at Corcoran in 2015 and eventually was kicked out and is presently housed at California State Prison, Solano County. There was Stephen Kamasi Simmons, who was a longtime Black Guerrilla family member, was born in December 1947 in the Bronx, New York. While he was a very young boy, he moved with his family to Los Angeles and states he joined the Slossons gang when he was only 10 years old. He first was sent to the California Youth Authority when he was 14 years old, and states that in 1965 he met George Jackson. He states that it was George that taught him Swahili. Kamasi was involved in the Folsom prison strike and helped draft the Folsom Manifesto in 1970. He was housed much of the time in CDC at San Quentin's Adjustment Center and is still a key participant in Black August events. According to Kamasi, Black August was started in 1979, a year after the death of Jeffrey Golden on August 1st, 1978.
I'm saying that we actually had a movement, and it still exists. And so those of us who were foremost in pushing this movement and organizing others, and who were the most active, we wound up on these lists, on these death lists. And they systematically went about the process of eliminating us. After George's death on August 21st, 1971, after his death, there was some more activity, very intense activity inside the prison system, okay? Then a full-scale repression where they came on a witch hunt and they locked everybody they thought was organized along the same line, locked everybody down. By this time, FBI comes in not only to investigate, but to start to interrogate people and to put together a report and figure out what's going on and who's who, and they try to figure out how they're now going to destroy the movement. So by 1978-79, the brothers in the pen and the movement had become so despondent, you understand what I'm saying, and demoralized, that it was necessary to find some way to revitalize their spirits and to get their recommitment to continue to move forward, because the conditions were still the same, that our people were still being terribly brutalized in these closets, behind these closed doors and behind these immense walls where the public not only could not see, but where they could even lose interest and not even care what was going on. So their brothers, fathers, sons, you understand what I'm saying, cousins and friends who had been captured and drugged to that side of the wall. And in the meantime, they would give them comedy and music and sports and entertainment to keep them busy, so they couldn't hear the screams, you understand what I'm saying, and they couldn't hear the screams of the torture, and they couldn't hear the repercussions coming back, and they didn't even see the smoke and the gas coming over the walls and the wire and the fires that we set. So we had to find a way to re-stimulate their interest in building a movement and continuing our efforts to make sure that they don't do us like this, that they don't commit crimes against humanity upon us. And you know what I'm saying? They don't dehumanize us. And so we is now not talking about a civil, but a human rights struggle being fought by prisoners to try to change the conditions so that anyone who will come behind us, we got to look at the fact that our little brothers are going to be coming in these penitentiaries one day. They stand a chance of coming in. Our sons and daughters stand a chance of coming in. So for the sake of our children's children, the buck got to stop right here with us. And if we got to give our lives today to make sure that it doesn't go on, we are prepared to do that if that's what it takes to make sure that the safety and the well-being of our sons and daughters, you understand what I'm saying, is in place. And so that's what Black August is about. Black August was created as a memorialization a commemoration of those who have given their all already, and a way to rededicate yourself to the same struggle that is not over, so that we say the struggle continues, and geography makes no difference. It don't matter whether you're in this country or that country, whether you're on the streets or you're in prison. The struggle does continue, and that's what we want to remember, especially during the month of Black August, and that's why during that month they fast as a sacrifice. During that month, as a commemorative sacrifice for those who've given their all. They make sure they don't horseplay, they don't bicker and fight amongst themselves. And George used to always say, settle your differences and come together and fight the common enemy. So one thing they have to do during Black August is make sure they don't get involved in these conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, group to group or person to person. At this time, you build and preserve the idea of unity amongst us all. You understand what I'm saying? And there are a number of other things that are done in that same spirit. So that's what Black August is about.
Simmons was incarcerated with some major players and personally knew George Jackson and Huey Newton. He is very well versed on BGF history. I believe he has his own podcast called Kamasi Speaks. Not that it really matters, but I also believe that he has a son, Kamasi Simmons Jr., that was a star athlete at Centennial High School in Compton, but evidently got fired from that position. There was Johnny Spain, who was born to a white mother and a black father in the Deep South. When he was 6 years old, he was adopted by a black family in California, and his mother sent him away for his own safety, evidently because he was of mixed blood. And back then, black and white in the Deep South, relationships were taboo, as well as any offspring could be targeted by white racist groups. At 17, he was sent to prison after killing a man during a mugging attempt. He said that he met George Jackson in prison, and Spain states that George changed his life by exposing him to the teachings of the Black family and the Black Panther movement. George Jackson was killed on August 21st, 1971. Johnny Spain was with him and also ran from the adjustment center. However, he hid in the courtyard, shielded from the gunners. As you know by now, George Jackson was not as fortunate, and he was killed, some say murdered, on that bloody day. Spain and others who participated with Jackson were put on trial as the San Quentin Six. Johnny Spain was convicted of murder, but that conviction was overturned in 1986 due to his attorney saying that the jury had been prejudiced because during court proceedings, Spain was shackled around the waist, hands, and feet, as seen here. For his conviction, he often dined with radical leftist Angela Davis, and he had trouble adjusting, jumping from job to job. One thing that I was very surprised to learn while researching Johnny Spain again is that he had a girlfriend named Michelle Sixta, who had been Rush Limbaugh's wife. That kind of surprised me because these guys are probably as far apart you can be. One, a right-wing conservative talk show host, and the other, a left-wing radical who was part of the San Quentin Six. After his release, Johnny Spain was involved in community organizing in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. There's also a book about him, Black Power, White Blood, The Life and Times of Johnny Spain. And lastly today, I'll briefly mention Willie Sadiki Stafford, who was from Los Angeles. And I understand, like Geronimo Pratt, covered in the last episode, was part of the Los Angeles Black Panther Party chapter. Eventually, he was granted parole and worked for Doc Holliday's Black Entrepreneurial Network, or Ben faction. Understand, for selling drugs, he was murdered by the Cambone Revolutionary faction. And while today I believe there's differences in philosophy, I believe there's no longer a kill-on-sight order by BGF from either faction on the other. In fact, there's not many BGF left in California. Some people have asked in the comment section if they are still around. Yes, they are still around, but a lot of them have been paroled and out in the streets and are laying low. As far as the Maryland faction, they seem to be more active than ever. They're a totally different thing on the East Coast, although they have borrowed some of the California faction's teachings. And so, that's all I have for you today. We only have one more episode left before we end our series on Black guerrilla family members and associates over the past 6 decades or so. For now, this is your host, Gabe Morales, signing off. Gangsters, cops, and politicians.
Should I go lax and discipline? In time of strife, refuse my hands, this oath shall kill me. Should I fear any man or be slow to take a stand? This oath shall kill me. Long live the spirit of George Lester Jackson and the guerrillas of Black August. Boy, Usi Gaidi Jama.